This is task 5 from the personal tax second sample assessment. Task 5 tests national insurance contributions. So we're told Mr. O is a sole trader and only employs 2 people. Mrs. E's gross salary for 24-25 was 18,700 and Mr. U's gross salary for 24-25 was 52,580. In addition, Mr. U has total benefits in kind for 24-25 of 3,880. So we need to complete the following statements and enter our answer in whole pounds only. If your answer is 0, enter a 0. So first of all then, we need to look at Mrs. E. So that's the first part of the question. And we're told that Mrs. E's gross salary was 18,700. And we're asked to work out the Class 1 national insurance contributions. So again, let's look at the 4 different requirements here. So the first part is asking for Class 1 national insurance payable by Mrs. E, by the employee. The second one is asking for a Class 1, again for the employee, but we're looking at Mr. U this time. The third one is asking for Class 1, but in this case, payable by the employer, by Mr. O. And then for part 4, it's Class 1A, payable by the employer, but the Class 1A, remember, relates to the benefits in kind. So we're looking at the last figure given to us in the question. Okay, so we've got 4 different things to do here for employees, employers, income and benefits. So the first one then, we're focusing on Mrs. E, where we have income of the 18,700. So let's have a look at the reference materials to guide us for this. So the way that national insurance works is that for the employee Class 1, then anything below 12,570 means that there's no national insurance to pay. And remember, we do this for each employment. So if we have 5 employments all earning not very much money, then there's no national insurance to pay. And then between the 12,570 and 50,270, there is 8% national insurance to pay. And then above that figure, there is 2% to pay. So Mrs. E has a total income of 18,700. So if we look at the first threshold, we've got the 12,570, and that incurs no national insurance. And then above that, we've got a further 6,130. So these 2 figures together give us the total income for Mrs. E, and that's going to incur national insurance at 8%. So you've got 490 to pay for this. So let's look at the next part then for Mr. U. And remember that Mr. U has income of 52,580, so a much bigger figure in this case. So we've got the 52,580. So remember, of that figure, the first 12,570 incurs no national insurance. And then for the next threshold, we have a gap of 37,700. So notice this is the same as with our income tax bands. So that would incur national insurance at 8%. And then anything above that would incur national insurance at 2%. So if we take our 52,580, deduct 12,570, deduct 37,700, we still have 2,310 that goes beyond that second threshold. And that's going to incur national insurance at 2%. So when we multiply all these out together, So the 37,700 multiplied by 8% gives us 3,016. The 2,310 multiplied by 2% gives us £46.20. So in total we have £3,062.20. And when we enter that, with in whole pounds, so we have 3,062 national insurance. So the next part then, what about the employer's contribution? Well, let's have a look at the reference material to remind us how that works. So for the employer, we have different thresholds. So anything below 9,100 gets no national insurance, and then everything above that is simply a flat rate of 13.8%. Now remember that Mr. O employs both of these people, so national insurance is relevant for both of them. So if we look at Mrs. E to begin with, so remember the first 9,100 is free of national insurance. So again, we can do the same calculation we did before. So we have the 18,700. So of that, we've got 9,100, which incurs no national insurance for the employer. And then the remaining 9,600 incurs national insurance at 13.8%. So Mr. O would have to pay national insurance of £1,324.80. And then for Mr. U, we've got 52,580. And again, the first 9,100 incurs no contributions for the employer. And then the remaining 43,480 has national insurance contributions at the 13.8%, which is 6,024. So both of these together give us a total of 7,325 and 4 pence. But that's not our answer, because employers do have an allowance of £5,000 for national insurance, unless you're a really big company. So this is to allow small employers potentially not to pay any insurance at all. So when we deduct that £5,000 allowance, it means that there's only £2,325 to pay. And then finally, we have our Class 1A national insurance payable on the benefits. So this is paid at the 13.8%, which gives us £535. Okay, let's just have a look at the tax tables to confirm that. So yeah, for the Class 1A, it's simply 13.8%, and there's no thresholds here. And then for the last part of the question, so we've got a true-false question here. So national insurance contributions are calculated on an employee's gross salary before the deduction of pension contributions. And yes, that's true.